Hello, Mari. Welcome to the Soul Line Self Care Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tina. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about our chat today. Excited to get to know you a little bit. So, if you could start off by sharing with me and the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, and maybe a little bit about your journey.
Absolutely. So, I am a trauma and mindset coach. I primarily work with women to help them heal their pasts, connect to their highest selves, and create their dream lives. I do a variety of modalities to get my clients transformation results from somatic therapy techniques to quantum energy healing. And I do all of it within the Akashic Records, which is a very unique way to do the work that I do with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but personally, on my journey, I had gone through so many major traumas in my young adult years, in my teenage years, and I lived for so long just thinking that those traumas were always going to be a part of me and my story and my day to day life because they were things I was really struggling to move past, even though I had done what society had told me to do to quote unquote heal them. I had done the talk therapy, I had done journaling and affirmations and all of those things that are, yes, great tools and they help bring us awareness, but oftentimes they don't actually give us the healing and connection that we need to fully heal, transcend, or integrate them. And so I had really reached a place of these are always going to be here. They're always going to be something that comes into my mind that is always part of my story of how I make decisions and what I think about myself. And when I found this work, that is really when that all shifted for me. So it truly inspired me to also be able to use this to help other people now do the same thing and realize that you don't have to stay in a place where you're unhappy or you don't feel confident or you feel like you're just a person that bad things happen to and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt that way for so long too. And now I don't. Like now I get to be in this place of I feel confident, I feel happy, I feel empowered, I feel like I'm a lucky person who good things happen to. And it gets to be that way. And I don't think oftentimes, at least I was never introduced to a world or a culture and environment where that was something that was communicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. So you talked about a few different things like quantum energy, somatic practices, and the Akashic records.
Yeah.
When you were on your journey, did you run into these different type of things like all at once, or was it kind of like part of your journey, like you fell into like somatic healing and then you got into quantum energy? Like what was the process for you?
For me, it's really interesting because I grew up very Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to college, the very first spiritual thing I ever did was an Akashic record reading. And I had kind of forgotten about it for a while. But when I was actually starting the work that I do now about 4 years ago, I knew that there was this deep spiritual aspect to it that I was missing. And I kept going through modality after modality. And when I found the Akashic records, I opened them for the first time, it was like floodgates. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God, this was the missing piece of the puzzle. And so it came very full circle for me with the Akashic records. But it wasn't something that I had experience when I was working with coaches or healers as a healing modality or a tool. It was just kind of like, it's like one of those things I feel like a lot of people hear about, but they don't really understand what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I had gone through a lot of quantum energy healing and karma healing and different things along those lines. And then the somatic healing aspect has really come in later. So it wasn't something where I was just doing all of them at once. It was kind of like we're going from stepping stone to stepping stone to stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
But it has all come together in a very unique way for me to be able to integrate them all at once and use them in a way where they're able to elevate and amplify each other.
That's really beautiful. I love that. So, when you talk about, so maybe let's get into the Akashic records.
Yeah.
Because you're right, like a lot of people don't understand what that is. And I was talking to another guest the other day about this, and we touched on it just a little bit. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I've never done it before, but I know a lot of people who do, and I hear nothing but good things. So maybe you could talk on that a little bit to explain what it is to people.
Yeah, I'd love to. The Akashic Records, for tangible terms, I try to make it relatable. There's two ways I can explain it. And so take which one resonates most with you. The first is like Google for the soul.
Hmm.
So it's really an energy that individuals are able to tap into and essentially read to get information about an individual, soul, person, place, collective. And the other way I like to explain it is like a library. And so you have this library, and every individual has a book. And so you can go and you can open their book and you can read about their past experiences, their thoughts, their feelings, their present, and also their potential futures. So with the Akashic Records, it it isn't something, I always like to clarify, it isn't something where I can just be like, I'm going to go open your records and read all about you. And no,
Yeah.
we need permission. We all have free will as humans, so I do need permission from whoever's records I'm opening in order to go into them. And they are protected by benevolent light beings, so they are very, um, if someone ever tries to access the records with ill intentions, they're not able to. And so it's amazing because as soon as I open up someone's records, they can immediately feel, one, a deeper connection just with their soul, and two, because when the records are opened, it's kind of like removing some of those more humanly things we experience, the limiting beliefs, the fears, and it just gives us a stronger connection immediately.
Hmm.
And two, it really helps people feel this sense of safety, because it is kind of like you're now in this energy of fully being supported and held when your records are open. So I always begin and end a session with clients, no matter what we're doing, by opening and closing their records, because then it does amplify the modalities and tools that we're using. Or even if we're just having a conversation and talking, it's doing a lot more of healing and work just with the records open, which is very
Yeah.
cool.
That is cool. And that was something that the other person I talked to said also, that it's just healing to be in the Akashic Records. Now, am I correct to say that these things that you are in the Akashic Records, like, because if we're talking about like quantum time or whatever you would call it, everything
Mm-hmm.
exists all at once, right? And so
Yes.
you have everything happening all at once. But is it correct to say, I don't know if I'm thinking of this the right way, that nothing is exact, right?
I
So,
would say that for me personally, there's a lot of Akashic Record readers out there who use the records in different ways, right? Some people think of them more kind of in line with like psychics or mediums. I personally don't love using it to do that kind of work, just
mhm,
because I you're seeking answers, which is okay. Everybody has those times where like you want certainty, you want clarity, and instead of finding them within yourself, so you're trying to find them from an external source.
mhm,
And so for me, when I'm using the records, I like to use them more of a modality of the healing, because if in I want people to be really committed to their healing journey and not just come to me when they want like a tune up or to solve a current problem and then they're good for a year and then they're in crisis mode again.
yeah,
I want them to experience that long lasting transformation to really impact and change their life and be that catalyst. I would say, to answer your question, that yes, like the records are always changing. We are able to go in, we're able to rewrite them, we're able to, every minute you could ask, like, what is for my highest good if I'm doing this? And if I make this decision, what's for my highest good? Because everything is changing every second for all of us.
mhm,
So there's never any certainty. Um, but it is really cool to see like healing that happens when you go in and you can heal the present and then see how it infiltrates all these other timelines,
yes, yeah.
which is something I love to just look at and watch when I'm in session.
That's really cool. And I like just a thought just popped into my head, like when it comes to talk therapy. And like, so say you're doing like a healing session and you're in the Akashic Records and you're healing something that's going on presently, but after this person does this healing, then it automatically heals things from the past and from the future, right?
Mhm.
So in talk therapy, a lot of times they bring people back into the past to like almost like relive the trauma,
Mhm.
which I feel like sometimes I'm not a therapist or a counselor. I have no education on that whatsoever, but I feel like sometimes that could do more harm than good in my mind. And
Yeah,
to hear like someone say, yeah, this can just heal you like all around, just your soul on a soul level is so much better.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot talk therapy just doesn't work for a lot of people. And I'm sure this happens to you too, but this happens in my business where, I'm a life coach and a health coach. I work with a lot of people that are dealing with like stress and anxiety,
Mhm.
burnout, overwhelm. And a lot of them have been working with counselors or therapists for years. And they come to me, and it's the first time that they ever have any type of solution or resolution or relief. And
Yeah.
I just find it really, hard to understand. I've never done talk therapy myself, besides marriage counseling. I've done that, so I guess that could count a little bit, but that it's not, it doesn't seem to be as effective as different types of healing modalities that are used in coaching.
I completely agree. I don't think I've honestly ever had a client who has not had that experience as well, where
Mm-hmm.
they've gone to talk therapy and been like, it hasn't been working. Maybe it helped like 5 or 10% or like max of 50%,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always still there. And you can feel it still there.
Mm-hmm.
And I always tell, I personally believe that we hold limiting beliefs, fears, traumas, whatever it is, we hold them on different levels. So we hold them physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically. And so when you're going to do talk therapy, it might be helping you heal like the mental aspect of it, maybe a little bit of emotional if you're really connecting to the emotions, like when you're talking and releasing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not hitting all the levels. And so that's why it doesn't tend to really benefit people. Like I think it is a good starting point for people because it does give awareness, but awareness doesn't heal you. It's
Yeah.
great for where we're at right now because logically, as humans, we want to understand it. We want to comprehend what's happening.
We
And
want validation too.
we want validation. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can understand it, but that doesn't fix it. That doesn't make it go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to emphasize that I'm not against counseling or therapy or in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, a lot of my clients,
Do
they see
both.
me, they do both.
Yeah.
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 They like a lot of my clients have both. And so I think that was a good way to explain it, the way you said all the different levels. And I think absolutely that's very correct. That sounds very accurate.
Yeah.
Um, so talking about going into like quantum energy, tell me what that means for people. What does that mean to you, and how would you explain that?
Oh, it's very hard to explain to someone who hasn't honestly experienced it. Um,
Yeah. Maybe
if you,
someone with a limited energy, like a limit, not energy, limited idea of what quantum energy is, like
okay,
beginner.
so I'll try to do this 101. We'll work
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
If when you think about energy, you think everything is made up of energy. There's energy all around us in the water, in your food, in the people you interact with, in your car, in your house. Everything is at the end of the day made up of energy. And so quantum essentially means 5D. We have the 3D, which is everything physical you can see, touch, feel. And then you have the 4D, which is kind of more of this in between territory. And then we go into the 5D. And that's really where the timelines start falling apart. And that's where everything gets to just be. But within the 5D is also the 4D and the 3D and the 2D and the 1D, because every time you kind of go up a dimension, you're still incorporating the one below it. So hopefully that's making sense.
Hmm.
And so when we're in the 5D and we're doing quantum energy healing, we are able to access those different all those different 4 levels that I talked about. And we're able to do healing on all 4 levels, which is really powerful with it. Instead of just going in and maybe doing like the emotional or the mental and some physical, we get to hit all 4 of them at once. So if you've ever experienced anything, we'll say like Reiki, for example, because I feel like a lot of people are familiar with Reiki. Yes, that is a type of energy healing. I love Reiki. I'm not anti-Reiki, but I will say I do think Reiki is something more where you're going in and you're doing clearing and healing. But generally, from my experience, I'm also a Reiki healer too. I've done Reiki healing before. So I can say from my experience in individuals who I've worked with and individuals I've talked to about Reiki is it doesn't really stick. Like it's because oftentimes we're not actually resolving what the root is. And so we're not actually getting to the root. We're not healing that part, or we're just continuing to doing the same thing that's causing
Mhm.
whatever the Reiki healing is supposed to be cleaning up and fixing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a band-aid to me.
Yeah.
And the
That makes
energy
sense.
healing, the quantum energy healing is really like for anyone who hasn't experienced it, if you take Reiki as like level 1 energy healing, this is like level 10. Like you're
Hmm.
just knocking it way much more out of the park. And so it is a lot, to me at least, a lot more impactful. And it is a lot more like we are really getting to the root of it, especially with the Akashic Records, because the Akashic Records, one, makes it feel smoother, it feels safer, it allows you to go deeper, it allows you to have more capacity in sessions. And we're able to use the records to get to the root. So I can say, like, okay, like this person's having perfectionism. Where's this coming from? Like, what's going on? And granted, I don't believe we actually need to know the root or the cause of any of our trauma or anything. Like, I'm not someone who's like, I'm going to make you go back and hypnotize you to like relive it and rewrite it or anything. But it can help us really get to the root of like, okay, if there's this perfectionism, what's underneath it? What's underneath that? And like maybe it comes down to really a worthiness or a lack of self love or a fear of abandonment or fear of rejection. And so we're able to get more into that root and heal the root that's off. It has all of these things coming off of it, the limiting beliefs, the defense mechanisms, all of the physical pain and armoring that's coming with it. And so I don't know, does that answer your question on
Yeah.
quantum energy
Yes.
healing? I went on a little
Yeah.
tangent there.
No, no, I was deep in it with you there. I was
Okay. I was like, where did this start?
Yeah, no, that's a very good explanation, and I love the way you put it. Now, like, also, I would like to hear your take on like somatic practices because I feel like everybody uses that word almost like it almost seems like it's getting overused a little bit, and they use it very broadly, and so
Yeah,
maybe it's supposed to be used broadly. I don't know, but what's your take on it?
I agree. It's definitely trending right now.
Hmm.
Um, and something that I see a lot of people doing is they're talking about somatic work or nervous system regulation, even, and they're giving people the tools that worked for them.
Hmm.
And that's my own personal take is that one, nervous system regulation tools, I love them. I use them. I have my clients use them. But I think they need to be customized to that individual to meet them where they're at now, whether they're in freeze or fight or fawn or whatever kind of trigger response they're in.
Hmm.
Because you could be in one trauma response and a tool or a nervous regulation practice would really benefit you. But if you give it to someone else who's in a totally different place, it might actually dysregulate them or give them very minimal results.
Hmm.
Right. And so a lot of individuals, they're saying, like, this is what worked for me. So it's going to work for you.
Hmm.
And so I like to give people practices to meet them where they're at. And I also believe that nervous system regulation needs to be used in conjunction with healing because it is giving you more capacity, it's creating that safety in your body that you need. But again, it's not giving you actual healing.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever is causing that dysregulation is going to continue to come up until you can do the somatic healing, the energy healing, whatever it is, to get to the root and give that the presence and connection and healing that it needs.
Mm-hmm.
So with somatic tools, I agree. It covers a huge variety of things that can look like breath work to tapping to parts work, IFS. Like there's so many different ways to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's one of those things that you kind of have to find the tools that work best for the client.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I call it I do that with my clients. I call it the self-care toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's certain situations and correct me if you disagree, but I feel like someone who's in like a full-blown panic attack is not going to be able to practice breath work. Breath work is
Yeah.
something to use before you go into the panic attack. So there's like different practices to use when you're inside of that panic attack, and
Yeah.
so I guess that's a very obvious example. But yeah, I call create your own toolbox. So like when I feel this emotion, this is what works for me. When I'm in this situation, this is what works for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
always explain it as so like running is something that I do. I love doing running, and movement is a great way to handle some difficult emotions depending
Yeah.
on the emotions. But you can exaggerate. I like if I run when I'm anxious, it exaggerates that because when you're running, you're
Mm-hmm.
like putting yourself into fight or flight. And so
You're
it
creating
actually,
more energy and more momentum towards it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But if I'm angry or frustrated, running really helps me release that. Like it helps
Yeah.
me move through it. And so that's how always use that as an example because I feel like it's better understood. So like, years ago when I was like 39, I had a stroke caused by stress. And my ways of handling the stress that I was going through at the time, which was a lot of stress, was working out, but like heavy duty, like running, boxing, kickboxing.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think back to that and I'm like, yeah, that was exactly what I didn't need. Like I needed
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yoga, I needed something a little calmer or something a little different than that.
Often the
Um,
things we don't want to do are the things we need the most.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you would have told me to do yoga back then, I would have been like, oh, no. And now it's
Yeah.
like, now I do yoga every day. So I guess a question that I always have, because I've never done this work, when you're doing like Akashic records or the quantum energy healing, how do you bring a person into that? Do you use meditation, visualization? How does that work?
It's really different depending on what we're doing and the client. So
Hmm.
honestly, no session looks the same. So it's kind of hard to answer that. Um, and it depends on their goals because I work with women on so many different things. It could be leaning more into their feminine. It could be something like burnout, or I want to feel more confident, or I have these traumas that I'm ready to release. Or maybe they are in a place where we just want to go in and create safety in their body for a while because that's oftentimes the first step.
Hmm.
Um, so it's always different. If I'm doing energy healing, usually I'll kind of like put on more of Hertz music, and I'll have them do a little bit of breathing and just get into a really more grounded state and connected to their body. Sometimes I have them verbalize and say things that they want me to say to help release it and to help it move and shift and be like, this is why you benefited me, but like I'm so ready to release this and I need to let this go for XYZ. And I have them really talk through it sometimes. Sometimes it does look like them doing a combination of somatic and energy work. I love doing
Hmm.
the somatic work while I'm doing energy clearing. I feel like that is really cool and really
Yeah.
powerful, but it's always different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so how what type of women do you tend to work with the most? What do you gravitate towards?
I work a lot with perfectionists. I work
Hmm.
a lot with people pleasers. Um, I do have, I feel like it kind of goes one of two ways. I do get clients quite a bit who they've created the life that they want or thought that they wanted, and it doesn't feel how they thought it would feel.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be really in this place more of, I thought I would be happy here. I thought I would feel more confident once I was here. I thought I would feel free. And even though on the surface and the outside, I have everything that I want, on the inside, it does not feel that way. So it kind of can go that direction, or a lot of the women I work with tend to go more towards my relationships are being impacted by my past. I don't feel safe. I feel like a lot of imposter syndrome, um, more of like a fawn people pleasing kind of place.
Yeah. So do people often seek you out when they need they actually have the knowledge that they need that deep healing or not really?
Yeah, I would say they do. I work a lot with referrals, honestly, which is great because then they tend to be more of my ideal clients, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but usually it is kind of when they've hit that place of like, I've tried everything I know to try, and I can't live this way, and this is my last resort.
Yeah.
Because like they've been doing the therapy, they've been working actually really hard, and they're not seeing results. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, this person told me I need to write affirmations down a bunch of times, and that's great. Affirmations are great, but they're just like covering up the stuff that you have because you're not actually releasing that. And so now you
Mm-hmm.
have imposter syndrome
Yeah, exactly.
or cognitive dissonance. And
Yeah.
so they tend to be really to the place of, I can't keep doing this anymore
Mm-hmm.
and something has to give.
All right, I have another question that just popped into my head about the
Yeah.
Akashic records, and yeah, I mean just in general, honestly. Um, and I have a feeling I know how you're going to answer this, but the how long does it take to get through healing when you're using that quantum energy in the Akashic records? It works really quicker. Um, is it different for every person? Does it depend on what they're looking for, or is it something that can really move people along quickly?
It tends to move quicker than anything else I've experienced.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not like, I think a lot of people expect to have like that lightning bolt moment during the session of like, oh my God, it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's not really how it works. Sometimes it could be like that day, sometimes it could be weeks later. It really kind of depends on what we're healing.
Hmm.
And what I always say tends to happen, and this is what a lot of people have shared with me, is that usually a couple of weeks after a session, and I like to give my clients a couple of weeks of integration time before session. So I don't like to do like back to back calls every week,
Hmm.
because I want them to have that time to really integrate. Otherwise, I do think it can be overwhelming because
Hmm.
a lot changes so quickly when we're doing this work. Um, but usually after a week or two, or maybe three, they'll be doing something and they'll realize and they'll be like, oh my God, that thing that 4 weeks ago was my biggest block, was really holding me back, that I couldn't stop thinking about, that was constantly impacting all of these areas of my life. I don't feel it anymore. It feels gone.
Hmm.
Like, I haven't realized that hasn't come up for me in like over a week, and I just haven't even realized it, but it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And it does feel very subtle like that, which I like. And because I've experienced more of those intense energy healings where like you're physically sick,
Hmm.
and purging a lot. But with this, it does tend to normally be very subtle, and it really gets to that place of, it just feels like this isn't part of my story anymore. Like it feels like, for example, with trauma or something, it feels like, wow, like, yeah, that happened, but it feels like a movie I watched or like a book I read. It doesn't feel like it's mine. It
Hmm.
doesn't feel like it's weighing on me. And it doesn't feel like it has any kind of hold over me anymore.
Yeah. Nice. I love that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I don't know if you saw that, but there's an, did you see that?
I did.
There's a gigantic ant crawling on my computer right now. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, it's legitimately, there's 6 inches of snow outside. So I'm like, I do have plants, but I was like, oh my God, I'm so distracted by that.
You need to look up the symbolism of an ant.
I know exactly. Yeah, as soon as I get off, he's up there again. He's gonna walk over my camera.
Oh, too
Anyway,
funny.
where can people find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yes, you guys can find me on my website and on Instagram. My Instagram is Mari Leigh B, MariLeigh B, and my website is marilee.com.
Perfect. That'll be in the show notes so that everybody can connect with Mari. And I want to thank you again for all your knowledge and for taking the time to explain everything to me and the beautiful work you do. So thanks for coming on.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, Tina, and for everyone listening.